What?
I am indeed wearing sweats, and I'm proud of it.
At some point, we're going to go back
sometimes-
to suit and tie.
Sometimes he actually turns his camera on and posts these on Twitter. So he's a step up ahead of you and I, which I would never do. So I will give him that bit of credit.
Raywat, fewer cases today. We're continuing that downward slope here in Manitoba, but still, when we open up later this week, it's only going to be 25% for restaurants. Gyms can open, but only one-on-one, nothing in a group setting. And if you are going to a restaurant, it's with family only. And that is the cautious approach, simply because while the variant isn't here, at some point it has to be. And we do not want to go back to October, which led to all those bad numbers in November and December.
Yeah, that is exactly the right perspective to have, is the precautionary principle. We don't know what we don't know, but we know that threats exist and that we don't have the tools yet to deal with them, so we want to be as hardened against infection as we can.
When you look at the opening up across the country, you've been experiencing a lockdown in Ontario. Would we be more cautious than some of the other provinces? It certainly feels like it took us a lot longer to tamp our outbreak down than it did in other provinces.
Yeah, it sounds like your reopening plans are a bit more cautious than ours, especially the limitations on dining and the gyms. What we're doing in Ontario is a bit perplexing to me, where our schools are opening in many parts of the province, and it strikes me if we're going to do that, we should give it a couple of weeks to see what the data looks like before we open additional things like restaurants and bars and so forth. But we seem to be opening everything at once in some parts of the province. That is not advisable from where I sit. And with the new variants being present here, everything's changed. The stakes are higher, the dynamic is different, and we don't really have the tools in place to the extent that we should to do things like screening, surveillance, and how to report outbreaks of the new variant and so forth. So the ducks aren't entirely in a row yet.
So when we look at going forward, our schools, the kids have remained in class for the most part throughout this, but we've chosen to close down other parts of society and other parts of the economy, if you will. Does the epidemiology show that that's a better strategy?
Well, the school aspect is a bit controversial. So about half the experts think that schools are pandemic accelerators, and the other half think that they're not. And we don't really know unless we do the appropriate kinds of surveillance. And right now, most of the forward contact tracing done in Canada isn't really set up to determine that, because we don't know if an asymptomatic child brings infection home and becomes the index case for their family. We just know that they show up after a symptomatic case has manifested in the schools, in the home rather. So what we need to do is have asymptomatic surveillance across the board in all schools and hopefully in all businesses as well. So to answer the question in an even more vague way, I think if we're going to open schools, schools should be the first things to open and the last things to close. And it strikes me that anything that deviates from that strategy is ill-founded.
The more vaccines we can get into arms, the better. So that's why I still think over the next couple of months, not just in Manitoba, but nationwide, we are going to be so very cautious, because we're not going to get anywhere near herd immunity until later this year, summer, July, August, September at the earliest.
Oh yeah, I mean the one solution that everybody can get behind, regardless of your political stripes and regardless of whether you think the economy is more important than public health and so forth, is vaccination at scale. Which makes it even more interesting that this rush to open up when we don't have vaccines secured yet. Again, it seems to me that the second we know when a bulk delivery of vaccines is scheduled, then we can start making plans to open up. Absent that, it seems a bit premature. But vaccination is everything. Now, our federal government tells us that we should expect millions of doses by the end of March, and I have no reason to doubt that. And if we can okay the additional formulations like AstraZeneca and Janssen and Novavax, then that number increases again. So I suspect we're going to have sufficient dosage definitely by the fall, and hopefully before then.
Yeah, hopefully is a word that we use a lot. Do you ever foresee a time when rapid testing is in workplaces and schools? Is that feasible? And does it give good enough results to make an impact?
I think it does. And many of us have been saying for many months now that rapid testing should be the tool we keep things open with. So rapid tests aren't perfect. Absolutely not. High false positive and high false negative rate. But it requires creativity and strategic usage to make them useful. They're really good at doing surveillance testing for an asymptomatic population, like a school population or a workplace where people are already self-restricting based upon the symptoms. So if you don't have symptoms and you go to work, you have no reason to think that you're infected. Therefore, a rapid test is a good choice for you. We can do it multiple times during the week and reduce the probability of a false outcome. Many other countries are starting to do this now, and the Americans are starting to do this. What we don't have in Canada really is the number of tests at scale, the number of tests being okayed by Health Canada, and the political will to put them into use.
Raywat Deonandan, we always appreciate your time and insight. Do you have a website or a blog or anything that you want to throw out there if people want to read more? We never give you an opportunity to float your stuff.
Yeah, my enormous blog ad revenue is 1 penny per day, it seems, which is great. My blog is mylastname.com, deonandan.com.
It is worth the read. And as always, we thank you for being our house epidemiologist here on 680 CJOB.
Thank you.
A question for Dr. Roussin on behalf of